Ah, well, hello everybody. It's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. We're going to start this second series, or the second episode of my series, Pairing Wines with Star Wars Films. And actually, that may be a little bit of a misnomer, as the more I think about it, and maybe which wines best represent a Star Wars film. So either way, we will get to that. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. A little bit about me. I'm a wine industry veteran now I sort of have, I talk about wines with, or more like the experience of being alive through wine with, an existential and sometimes philosophical tilt. Either way, thank you for joining me. This series has been a lot of fun for me. It's also been it's just given me a lot to think about, and how much the Star Wars films have affected me and my life over the history of it. I saw my first Star Wars film oddly in the theater when I was 7 years old, so 1977, and it's had a lasting impression with each movie as they've been released. So for those of you who are joining me for the first time in this particular series, you'll note that we started off with Star Wars: A New Hope. So we're going to go through the films as they were theatrically released. Without much further ado, because I do have a lot of things that I want to talk about, we're going to jump right into it. So as the scroll of The Empire Strikes Back, the very first line is, "It is a dark time for the rebellion," and that couldn't be more true of actually our heroes in the rebellion, both all Leia, Han, and Luke. Also, a little switch up from last week, I'm drinking a fantastic wine, the wine that I think represents The Empire Strikes Back more than any other wine, and I'm going to reveal this wine at the end of the broadcast. So I'd love for you to make a comment. Let me know what you think I'm drinking, or let me know what you think, which wine best represents The Empire Strikes Back. It's a dark time for the rebellion. And as we start off the movie, our heroes are basically on the run. Also, they have a common thread, that these are heroes of ours that are psychologically shattered in their own way. And what I mean by that is these are three main characters that are on a path. They're not following their bliss. They're living inauthentic lives. We can start off with Leia, who really it is the first time that we're really going to see her as a hero in this film. I think it could be said in the previous film she was less the hero and much more the boon or the treasure. She was, part of the task of the hero's journey in terms of what they had to do to become the heroes, and she was in fact in Star Wars more the treasure than actually a leader or a big part of the resistance. At least we didn't see her there. So her authentic life is that she is not leading the way she's supposed to be, and also she is not really admitting her attraction and what would soon be love for Han Solo. So we have that first character who's living their inauthentic life. Then we get to Han Solo, who is basically living a life of decisions made by fear. And that leads down a slippery path, as it does in the movies and it does in real life. He is on the run from bounty hunters. In fact, he is actually leaving the rebellion just to get the hell out of there so that bounty hunters won't find him. It doesn't go his way, as we know that. And then lastly, we have Luke, who is starting to explore the ways of the Force. He's trying to train himself, and eventually he's going to get his ass kicked by some sort of ice monster, which I've never been a geek enough to know exactly what that was called. So if anybody knows that, you can definitely post it in the comments. But however, he's starting to learn, except he is psychologically fractured as well. He is not in a place where he's going to be able to accept the truths of life, truths of the universe, and we're going to come to that in just a second. So if you're just joining me, and I see a couple of our friends out there. Russ, thank you for joining me. Steve, Craig, always a pleasure to see and hear from you. And Charlene, thank you so much for joining me. Also on Instagram, I've got that camera up there, the charming Wino. So good to see you again. So thank you for joining. Again, I am revealing the wine that I think that best represents The Empire Strikes Back. It's in my glass. It is delicious. And if you think you know what it is, or I would just like to hear from you in the comments what you think it is, or what wine best represents The Empire Strikes Back, and we'll see if our stuff coincides. So as we move forward, I was saying that all of our heroes are living inauthentic lives at this point. And really, we've talked a little bit about Leia, and we'll get back to her in a second, and Han, but really, this movie, a lot of it is about Luke and his, one criticism of Star Wars is Luke has always been sort of whiny, and he really is, which is kind of funny. He, interestingly enough, every test he's given, from even being on Hoth, into meeting Yoda, going through the trials that he puts him through, and even facing Darth Vader towards the end. I'm not even going to say spoiler alerts because the film's like 100 years old now. The point is that he's not ready for it, and he fails at every single turn. And why? Because, again, being sort of psychologically and spiritually fractured, he is not able to come to terms with the truths that the universe is putting before him. And therefore, there is no try, there is only do. He was unable to do. He was unable to accept that his power within the Force was actually unlimited. Every trial that we've seen him in, from raising the X-wing fighter out of the swamp, as well as facing all of his fears and hate in the cave in Dagobah, he fails on every single turn. And again, we talked about, he's not ready to accept those truths. So as we move on, one of the themes that is presented in The Empire Strikes Back is actually the belly of the whale. And typically the belly of the whale means death. When you're stuck in the belly of the whale, you don't get out of this situation alive. Metaphorically, what that means is spiritually, psychologically, intellectually, all of those things. The belly of the whale destroys all of those. And when we emerge from it, it is actually rebirth. So when we talk about belly of the whale, we're talking about the psychological and intellectual breakdown, and then rebirth as we exit out of that. One of those great themes that is, I think, true not only in the films, but true in real life. There's so very often we are presented with problems, situations that sometimes we just can't get back. And it's only when we sort of take one step back, we re-examine the situation, we look at it in a new way, that's when we actually go ahead and move forward past that particular situation. There's another really sort of great metaphor for that is for people of faith, whether it's a church or a temple, spiritually and psychologically, as you go through and sort of experience the experience of that particular faith in that realm, you are psychologically broken down and then also put back together and rebirthed, and you are a new person. You are actually a different person than you were that when you entered that particular place, whether it be a cathedral, a temple, I don't know, a garden grove, maybe it's that too. So, again, we see these themes in Star Wars that play to our current situation and play to modern life. That's what sort of mythology is all about. So I'm just kind of looking at my notes because sometimes I get a little sidetracked. Again, I'm Jeremy. I'm the Existential Wine Guy, and I'm talking today about the wine that I think best represents the Star Wars movie. In this case, it's The Empire Strikes Back. And I also am here to take any questions that you have about wine, Star Wars, or what have you. a lot of people might say, hey, that sounds a little bit odd in terms of, the metaphor of the belly of the whale and how it actually applies to, The Empire Strikes Back. I'll also say that physically in the movie, they are literally in the belly of a huge space creature living on an asteroid. So, it's absolutely there. Now, how do our heroes get past these situations? How do they, when do they get past these situations? And, for Leia, I think there's this really great moment that she becomes not just a boon, not just a part of someone else's journey. But I love that moment when Lando, releases them after they're on the Cloud City. Han has been frozen, and he's basically being shipped off. And Lando seizes the day. He releases the prisoners. He tells everyone in the city to get the hell out of here because the Empire is coming for them. And there's that moment as soon as the cuffs are released. Leia is absolutely in charge, and she leads as a leader like no other. And all of a sudden, little things start to go right. I don't know if you find that in your own life when you make very authentic decisions that things seem to go better. That you immediately you are on the right path. Well, this absolutely happens with Leia, and she starts to kick ass all the way through. So it's kind of really cool for her. Han, less so. Although I will say one thing that's interesting about Han is he's never really fully committed himself to the rebellion, to anyone. And it really seems that just before he gets frozen, he commits himself to Leia. And, even though he's frozen and put in this sort of odd stasis, he is on his way to leading a more authentic life. And he certainly does that in the next movie, Return of the Jedi. And then we have Luke Skywalker, which is by far one of the more interesting characters in this particular movie. Yes, he's been failing all the way through this movie, and even so, he thinks he can take on Darth Vader, and he loses in spectacular fashion. And he loses because he is also living that inauthentic life, and he's not willing to accept the truths of the universe. The big one being, and that this is also the big reveal, is that that Darth Vader is his father, and his unwillingness to accept that. Basically, he's jumping off of a cliff. He doesn't even know where he's going. Again, it's another aspect of failure. Until that one moment when he falls through the city and through all those slides like a water park, doing water slides, and ends up at that end of an antenna, and he reaches out. And who does he reach out to? He tries to reach out to Obi-Wan Kenobi. It doesn't happen. He's not there yet. In terms of Luke is not there to be part of that. Instead, he reaches out to Leia. And that is that's the turning point right there for Luke. That is the point whether he admits it or not, or whether he knowingly accepts, he understands that Leia is part of his tribe. If not, maybe his sister. We'll get there in the next movie to be sure. And she turns around in course to save Luke, and basically they're off. Except there's another great metaphor for the condition of our heroes throughout the film, and that is in and of itself the Millennium Falcon. From the very beginning of the film, if you remember, the Millennium Falcon is continually not working or in a state of disrepair. The whole thing is they're limping from one asteroid to the next, and eventually to the Cloud City, Bespin, to try to repair it, and it never happens. And there's that one moment when R2-D2 comes in and fix it. And we know that our heroes at the same time are feeling the same way that the Millennium Falcon is. At that one particular moment, the drive turns on, and boom, they are absolutely out of there, and their lives are saved. So there's some really interesting metaphors, like little physical metaphors, throughout the movie. The belly of the whale actually being inside the giant worm creature. It is also the Millennium Falcon, and also if we also want to take a look at that, the C-3PO, the scene where he is literally shot to pieces, and he's slowly brought together by the group, first by Chewie, eventually by R2-D2, and that's, how everything's resolved. That's how we know that our heroes are about ready to move on, and they are at a different place, that they've actually gotten out of the belly of the whale, that they are reborn, both intellectually, spiritually, and everything else. That's a lot of talking, Jeremy. Hey, it's Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. I'm talking about the existential crisis of The Empire Strikes Back. I am also about to reveal which wine I'm drinking. So if anybody's got a guess on it, would love to see it. I don't think anybody's put it just yet. But I guess it's about that time. I chose the wine that best represents to me The Empire Strikes Back. This is a very lovely Pinot Noir coming from the Burgundy region of France. The reason I chose this wine is in the first movie, we had very sterile environments that we saw our heroes. The first one obviously being Tatooine, which is dry and kind of that sort of tundra, not frozen tundra, but a desert tundra. Eventually, we get to just the outer reaches of space, and we get those very sterile environments. Oddly, Hoth, even with all the ice and everything else, there was lots of life there. Then we get to Dagobah, and Dagobah is everything green, and it is earthy, and it almost has a presence unto itself. I feel the same way about Pinot Noir. Pinot's, especially out of the Burgundy region, and basically, Oregon and some in California, very earthy. That's one great thing about wine in general, is that we will accept these errant notes and flavors that we wouldn't accept in other things. In cheeses, you can have those really harsh notes. And in Pinot Noir, you can definitely get that, especially depending on the terroir. You'll get everything from that earth. You'll even sometimes get barn, mushroom, things like that. All things are really living things, and I always felt the same that way about Dagobah, which is the planet that that we meet Yoda and that he's been living on in exile over a bunch of years. So if your guess was Pinot Noir, you're absolutely right, at least for me. I would love to hear from you. I would like to hear if you think I'm right about this one. If you've got maybe a better choice, I would love to see that. And just those sorts of things. Again, I'm Jeremy, the Existential Wine Guy. Thank you so much for joining me. I thought this was going to go a little bit longer, but it looks like we're right on time. We're going to hit just that 20-minute mark. I don't like to take you too far away from your evening. I am also available for private tastings, tasting room consulting, dabbling more and more into wine writing. Don't worry, I'm not going to be a critic. I don't think that the world needs another wine critic right now, but I do enjoy sharing the experience of wine, and maybe there's an opportunity for me to share that experience with you. All right, so we're just hitting that 20-minute mark. Again, thank you so much for joining me. Next week, we're going to be talking about Return of the Jedi. I've got a really nice wine already picked out, and I hope to see you there, and I hope to have you join the conversation. Did I talk about everything? I did. Thank you so much. Have a great rest of the week. Cheers.